Die Aufzeichnung läuft. Your stage, Kubair.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, change makers. I'm Kubair Shirazee, and I'm not going to tell you a lot about myself because I've got a very heavy digital footprint. So if you just Google me, you'll find it pretty much all over the place on social media, and a few presences in terms of platforms that I write on. For me, brief intro is I'm an Arsenal fan, so don't hold that against me. I coach my 8-year-old son in his football team. For a change, I don't have to call it soccer, which is nice. And it's nice to be speaking at a mainland European event. Feels a bit more connected to mainland Europe, doing, talks with folks from mainland Europe. I wear essentially 3 hats. This is like the main hat I wear. For me, Agile is life and life is Agile. My commercial hat is this. This is where you could say I learn and I earn, and this is where we invest, and this is where we learn more. And so the cycle kind of continues. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Peace Through Prosperity. The Peace Through Prosperity is a innovation lab, right? So, excuse me. It's a social innovation lab. It's self-funded. And the reason why we keep it limited to self-funding is simply because as we once went for a grant, and we learned the hard way, what it means when a product owner is no longer empowered. So if you want to bring change in society, one of the things we learned over the years is you have to be empowered to bring the change that you want to bring, as opposed to the change that institutions want to see. I'm going to give you folks a couple of seconds to read this. Yeah. Can we relate to it? Can we all relate to it?
Yes.
Yeah. Would it surprise you that this was actually Carl Sagan in 1990? So 33 years onwards, right? And we're still here, right? 33 years onwards, our message is slightly changed, which is Agile for a better world. But the key message remains the same, that each and every one of us, right, is longing for a better world. Now, what's the difference this time around? Right, one of the things that always I kind of reflect on is firstly, why? What happened? Right, 33 years later, I'm sure 2 centuries ago as well, people were still, striving for a better world. So what happened? Right, it's not like our ancestors or those before us didn't do enough. We actually stand on the shoulders of giants like Carl Sagan, who continue to inspire people despite no longer being with us. And why Agile? What's changed? That's something that I often sit and reflect on. And the why Agile part is actually the easy part. Because now perhaps we have a means to respond to anti-patterns in a complex adaptive system. And this is obviously a huge assumption that previously we didn't have such effective means to respond to anti-patterns in a complex adaptive system. I'd like to somehow a little bit think like that. Why? Because otherwise it becomes really depressing in terms of like, if you did have means to respond to complex adaptive systems centuries ago, then why didn't you? That'd be like a question to go back in time and ask, the world then, as in, why didn't you respond? If you knew how. For me, the journey is quite personal. So there's me pre-2010, and then there's me post-2010. Pre-2010, so I've been an Agile practitioner since 1997, when I launched my first startup while still at university. And I got introduced to practices such as rapid application development and joint application development and DSDM. And then 2001, I got given the book on Scrum by Ken and Jeff. And it wasn't until late 2002 that me and my team actually read the book, and the way we read the book, and it's a short, funny anecdote I'll share, is we cut the book up into chapters. So we swarmed as a team on the book. And within a week, we had some form of Scrum up and running in a team of about 23 people. And at that point, up until 2010, Agile, and the moment we started using Scrum, you could say we all kind of fell in love with its simplicity and its lightweight nature and the adaptable nature. Pre-2010, in those days, agility was about responding to change and complexity at speed, at work for greater efficiency. Never really saw Agile as something that you take beyond work. It was like that tunnel vision. And Scrum was a means to an end. It helped us focus on growing relationships and user base and our product ecosystem and our profits. And it was centered around creating delight in life. For me, my family, for my business partners, for my employees, for my colleagues, for my customers, however we could, but it wasn't beyond that. But in 2010, things changed. Well, actually, there were two events that kind of changed perspective for me personally. So I've always been an activist. So I was born in England. I was a child of exile. And when we could go back to Pakistan, so we went back to Pakistan. But I come from a marginalized community that's never been welcome in that country. You know, I've got it. My older brothers used to say we've got it doubly bad. A, we're considered heathens by the majority of the people in that country, and B, we're Persians, so we stick out like a sore thumb to become easy targets. So 2009, I walked away from a bomb blast. It was a miracle, you know, and there's nothing short of a miracle that I walked away. I was about 20 feet away, and somehow I managed to walk away along with my friends with nothing more than loss of hearing and just some mental trauma, right? And then 2010, my older brother, on the 10th of August, he was murdered by Islamic extremists. Again, for being from a marginalized community and being someone who was doing something for the community. And that was the pivotal moment. That was the existential threat, because it wasn't just Kubair Shirazee. When they eventually caught the guy, which is actually pretty good, it was 3 days when they caught the guy, it was a target assassin. He had a list of all of us 5 brothers on him. It became an existential threat. It wasn't a random act of violence, it was a targeted act of violence. And with that, you could say my thoughts started evolving to a place where I had come to a realization that we are actually at war. And I have no means to fight these people. But then I had another realization that I have the means to fight these people. I actually have better tools and weapons in my arsenal than they could ever have. And that was my ability to instill change, my ability to facilitate change in human behavior, my ability to understand complex systems, my ability to design experiments around it. And the more I started thinking in that way, the more stronger I felt. And for me, agility post-2010 became a means to effectively respond to change and complexity at speed for greater impact, for people, for communities, and society. And the whole notion around Agile turned into 4 key ingredients. And these kind of I keep evolving them over the years. And those 4 key ingredients, excuse me, those 4 key ingredients are being human, being people-centric, creating good trouble, and being disciplined. And Scrum, over the years, again, Scrum became a minimum viable approach or a minimum viable means of bringing all of this to life. And by that, all of what I mean is being human, being people-centric, creating good trouble, and being disciplined. It's surprising what an existential threat can do to one's mindset. There's nothing that can accelerate mind shift quicker than an existential threat. And that stands true for business, people, society, and communities. Because we get often called in by large organizations because now they're in panic mode, right? So my clients go, oh my God, my competition's going agile. So we need to go agile. Kubair, how fast can you do it? Right? I'm sure you guys are familiar with those kind of sentiments, maybe not those words, but faster, faster, faster. Not really about faster. First and foremost, it's about sense making. And that was the key thing in those early days in 2010 and 2011, was trying to make sense of what on earth just happened. What is going on? Where are we going? And is that the right direction? And what is the destination? And what's the course correction needed? So all of this material I'm going to share with you. So I don't expect you guys to read this, by the way, right? On the slide. This is all available on Miro through links on the deck. And if the PDF has removed the links, then feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to share the Miro board where all of this is developed. When it comes to sense making, obviously leveraging something like Cynefin, served us well. Leveraging something like the Mobius loop from Gabriel Benefield, that served us well. But our initial research was very haphazard, right? This is 2010, 2011. We're having conversations, with people who hold radical and extremist views, and we're trying to make sense of what's going on. And you could say, I stumbled upon this process where, when things are chaotic, you need to do something radically, radically different. And what I did radically different was I exited from all my startups. And I took a complete break from commercial activity, because now there's an existential threat. The focus has to be different. It has to be delight in life, but not just for myself, my colleagues, my peers, my customers. I have to wear a wider lens. And with that, with those exits, it allowed me to pivot my purpose with ease and focus. And that's one of the values, right? Focus, and focus on what is truly important. What is the priority? And the priority is to change society. Our research led us to a research over about a year and a half, which included 500 plus interviews, one-to-one, face-to-face interviews. It included 200 plus empathy maps and personas that we built. And when I say we, by this time I'd assembled a team of me plus 2 people, which was my wife and Abdul Rashid, who joined us in the early days and still is with us. And what our research concluded was, actually, it's very simple. The root of all evil, and we still hold this view, is marginalization. It's nothing grand, it's not foreign policies. Sometimes it can be. It's not corrupt institutions. Sometimes it can be, but all of that leads to one thing, which is marginalization of individuals and communities. And where these communities are marginalized and they live in a conflict-affected environment, guess what happens? These communities become violent. And that violence is a cry for change, right? So underneath all of that hate is that insecurity, inability to create their own narrative of change. And I often see marginalized communities inside enterprises as well, not marginalized in the same way, but marginalized nonetheless. The agile change agent who keeps butting his or her head against a wall, the product owner who isn't empowered, yet is expected to perform. The pressure that the organization and leaders put on their teams without providing them with the environment and the support needed to truly thrive. And it is no different in society. The problem in society is far grander, far bigger, and far more dangerous if we let it fester. So what we did was we started radically repurposing what we already know. So the existing skills and knowledge and practices and tools as an agile lean practitioner, as a tech entrepreneur, those were the skills I had. Those were the things I had. Those were the practices I had. Now I had to radically repurpose them and take them into a different arena. And that arena was the most complex thing that we all live in, which is society. So we decided, we designed a few experiments in those early days. We designed a mini MBA program to target micro entrepreneurs in these conflict-affected communities. We designed a kitchen garden project, which was to create a urban farm on the rooftops of shanty towns. We created 2 acres of arable land on shanty town roofs. The kitchen garden experiment didn't work because not all experiments work. But the MBA, oh my God, that worked. It works. And as soon as we figured out that it works, we said, okay, let's open source this because this works. And the reason to open source is I've been just as long a member of the open source community as I have been of the Agile community. And the things that we are talking about in the Agile community now are the things that the open source community has been talking about since the late 1990s. We share a similar ethos, we share similar principles. And now it's about scaling it. And the kind of, you could say, specific practices we brought to bear have been the use of Scrum, have been group coaching, have been communities of practice. We're never really going to get into this space because it's always going to remain chaotic and complex and complicated. But the best we can hope for is to leverage what we know and bring that to bear in these communities with individuals and communities to enable them to create their own narrative of change. Because look, at the end of the day, we all want change, right? At a personal level, at a family level, at a community level, from our towns, from our villages, to our cities, to our country, to this planet. We all want change. We all want sustainable change. I'm going to share with you the journey of Peace Through Prosperity and how it's kind of panned out for us and what we've managed to achieve, which being a Brit, it sounds weird whenever we toot our own horn, but it is significant, right? What a husband and wife set out to do in 2010 in the face of something pretty nasty, dark, and evil. And what we are now, a team of about 13 odd people spread across England, Pakistan, Yemen, and Egypt. Our journey obviously started in 2010, and I seriously pray and hope no one has to think about this journey under the circumstances that we did. But in 2011, we concluded our research. In 2012, we launched the first ever experiment, which was the mini MBA program, and we ran it with 35 individuals in a semi-urban setting in northern Pakistan, where most of this evil and hate was festering in those days. And what we saw surprised the bejesus out of us. We saw 27% revenue growth. We saw 49% growth in profitability with these 35 people over a period of 6 months. And when we saw a mind shift, not just a mindset change, but a mind shift, when we realized that these people now have the ability to write their own narrative of change, create their own story of change, they completely changed as human beings. So we said, okay, this works. Well, it works with 35 people. Let's scale it and see where it goes. So we scaled it. In 2013, we went to 100 participants again in a semi-urban setting. In 2014 and 15, we said, okay, we're ready. We're going to go to a complex environment. So we went to Karachi, which is a mega city. As a city itself is marginalized, which is a sad fact about that city. That within that country, that's the most marginalized city. That's the most richest city, yet it's the most poorest of cities. And we worked with 200 individuals. In 2016, we worked with 300. We didn't look back. We kept scaling. In 2019, we went to Yemen. Yemen's been in a state of civil war since 2016, 2017. And we had some connects in Yemen who reached out and said, we could really use your help here. And they could really use all our help there. So we went to Yemen and we said, well, let's experiment and see what happens. In 2020, excuse me, we expanded again. despite COVID, we still managed to expand in 2020. In 2020, late 2020, we went to Egypt. Again, Cairo has similar problems with a lot of refugees. And it's a funny thing, like, you know, it's not a funny thing, but it's a funny fact that most refugees that leave their country in Africa or in the Middle East, they don't actually head to Europe. The majority of them head to Egypt. Familiarity of culture, of language, and proximity. It's closer to them. So Cairo has more problems than we can imagine, because they have Eritreans, they have Sudanese, they have people from Congo, they have people from Mali, they have people from Libya, they have the refugees from Syria, they have refugees from Yemen. And Cairo is a poor country. Sorry, Cairo is a poor city. Egypt is, again, a poor country, a mismanaged country, if I may say so. And when we went to Egypt, our remit was we're going to go there and we're going to try and create bonds between these different communities so that there isn't the similar kind of strife that exists in other places where we've seen have welcomed refugees, but then it's created socioeconomic problems for the locals. So we said, okay, we're going to get in early as soon as we can, and we're going to try and see what we can do there. In 2021, we grew again. In 2022, we had to slow down a little, but then 2023, again, we're growing. And the way we grow is through the open source model and through partnerships. So we partner with other organizations and we say, here's an experiment and it works. Here's the data behind it. Would you like to run it? Yes. In that case, we will teach you, we will guide you, we will support you. Our only requirements are two. One, you will deliver it free of cost because this is our gift to you and this is going to be your gift to the others. And two, share your data with us. Don't share personal data, but share how you're progressing, how are individuals progressing. And if you change anything in the curriculum and the program, please share it back with us so that others after you can benefit from your learnings as well. Again, it's an agile and open source principle. What we've achieved in terms of impact, again, has been nothing short of, bless the universe, amazing. In Pakistan, over the last, 11 odd years where we've been running this experiment, we've seen on average profitability growth of micro entrepreneurs of 43.46%. This is measured over a 6-month period. We've seen double-digit growth in revenue. And when I shared this data a few years ago with a venture capitalist friend of mine, I didn't tell him what these businesses are. He said, I want in on that action. He goes, where do we invest? This is a freaking unicorn. And I was like, then I told him what these unicorns were. And that surprised him, but he found it funny, right? It's not funny. It's encouraging. When the little guy, when the 99% can grow like this, it makes us feel warm. Why? Because we're privileged, right? And that is something that none of us can deny on this call. We are privileged. We are amongst the 1% in the world. And with that privilege comes that responsibility to look after the other 99%. Because if we fail to do that, then we fail to be human. It's as simple as that. What we achieved in Egypt in a very short time was even more remarkable. And we're obviously deep diving. Why is it that there's such a big impact on their profitability growth with such a modest increase in their revenue, and how might we translate that across to these regions? In Yemen, we're seeing quite the opposite. Yet that does not deter us, because in Yemen, it's not about the revenue. It's not about the profitability. In Yemen, it's about providing that community with a support mechanism, providing them with a hope that there are people outside of your country who still care enough to be there for you, who still care enough to keep investing in you so that you can have a safe space, because you can't physically have a safe space in Yemen, in Sana'a. Why? Because it's civil war. There have been times when there have been classes running and you can hear explosions in the background. And then you look at the resilience of the people who are there who don't bat an eyelid. They just keep their focus on what they're being taught. Why? Because they become accustomed to that. And that's hard to digest, because no one should be accustomed to that. No one should have to live like that. It's as simple as that. In Yemen, the key thing that we're doing in Yemen is providing these micro entrepreneurs with a community of support outside their community of support. So the mini MBA group itself has become a secondary network of support for these individuals, who are mostly female, because most of the men, guess what? They're out fighting. The impact we've had, we've documented pretty much all our journey from nearly the very start. And I would encourage you to go to the website, download our reports on Egypt and Yemen. They're fresh out of the oven. I think the Yemen report was actually published last month. And explore what's been achieved. And then consider how might you do the same. Adopt this program or another. I'm not here to sell you programs, right? I mean, even though they're free. I'm just here to tell you that why Agile? Because it freaking works. And we've got 12 years of data to prove it, that it works. And why Agile? Because it enables us to respond to these anti-patterns in our complex adaptive system, ranging from marginalization of individuals, ranging from degradation of democracy. That's another initiative that we've been working on. I mean, name a job in this world where when you get the job, you're not going to get reviewed or fired for 4 or 5 years unless you do something terrible. That's a member of parliament. That is unacceptable to me. Why? Because we hold ourselves accountable. We hold each other accountable. We self-reflect and we work towards continuous improvement. That's been ingrained in us now. It's a very natural state of being. Whereas these guys whom we elect to govern on our behalf, they don't. They rule us. They govern on behalf of big industry. So that too has to change. And again, Agile provides us with a means. And the means is very simple, right? It's empiricism. It's learning by experience. And guess what? It's transparent. This stuff is not working. Right? If it's not working, we've already inspected it and we've come to a conclusion it's not working. And guess what? It is our responsibility to adapt, because we've seen it and now we cannot unsee it. And once we've seen it, it becomes our responsibility to do something about it. Many years after my journey started, Stephen Denning, I was reading Stephen Denning, and I read something that he articulated something that had been going on in my head for years, but I couldn't find the words to articulate it. And he said, if internal systems, processes, goals, values, or culture gets in the way of creating customer value or customer delight, then they must be changed. I borrowed that and I reinterpreted that. And what I say is, if institutions, bureaucracy, policies, values, or culture get in the way of creating citizen delight, and for me, the citizens is every single person on this planet, then they must be changed, i.e. they must be disrupted. This is just one means to disrupt. There are other means to disrupt. And I would encourage you to explore those other means, as in how might you bring disruption, needed disruption. There's a phrase, create good trouble, which is something that Representative John Frank Lewis in the US, who was a colleague of Martin Luther King, said. He said, go out and create good trouble. Why? Because you have to disrupt what doesn't work. And that is our job. We have to disrupt what doesn't work. Because if we don't, then we don't deserve to be called Mittelveranderers, agents of change. That's what we do. We change stuff, not just in organizations. I mean, we primarily do that in organizations, but the call of the need of the hour, the need of this planet, the need of this community, is that we take that skill set that we have and we start applying it outside of the organization. Why? Because for me, it was an existential threat, right? That it felt like I'm putting out fires in a frying pan by committing myself to enterprise change, enterprise transformation, and thinking very little about the house, which in itself is burning. There's no point in me saving the frying pan if the house is going to burn. I have to balance the two. Sometimes it's about doing more outside of enterprises. And sometimes it's more about doing inside the enterprises. And I invite all of you to find that balance for yourselves. My call to action is get curious and ask yourself, how might this experiment, or how might any experiment, benefit marginalized communities around me, near me, or in places I have networks of like-minded agents of change? Because you will find marginalized communities around you. Because sadly, the world we live in, there are marginalized people everywhere. There are marginalized people down my street. There are marginalized people on the high street. And you will find the same. There's the obvious marginalization, which are people who are homeless. And there's the not so obvious marginalization, right? Which we have to dig and explore and find. And that becomes, again, that is our duty. Why? Because we need to be connected with our fellow human beings. How else are we going to help them? And how else are we going to change this world if we don't? Come talk to us and we'll explore social transformation together. I'm always open to a conversation, regardless of you wanting to take peace through prosperity's model or you wanting to develop your own model. Why? Because that is how we will exponentially grow. Because otherwise, what we're doing at Peace Through Prosperity, and pardon the phrase, is like pissing in the ocean, right? What we need is exponential growth. And that's not going to come from one organization, but that's going to come from 7 billion people, or rather 1% of 7 billion people. Get involved and take the next smallest step that you can in order to bring your agile craft to communities to facilitate the journey towards a better world. Because it's our duty to respond to the anti-patterns in our complex adaptive system. This is not going away. We're not going away. Despite Elon Musk trying to establish a colony on Mars, that's not happening. That's not going to change the situation over here. We're going to change that situation over here because, you know what? We have no option. And I know you know that because you're here early in the morning listening to this guy. Danke.
Thank you, Kubair.
You're very welcome.
Questions?
Please.
Fragen. Ihr könnt die Fragen auch auf Deutsch stellen und wir übersetzen sie. Ergänzungen, Anmerkungen.
Perhaps let me then ask a question in English. Kubair, you've talked to me about your initiative already in the past. I mean, this is the first time it became really concrete for me. So I was thinking, if there's someone who would like to join perhaps in a new language, and you're using this open source model, like how long, if someone committed to this and with a connection in the respective country and or the respective target group, how long does it usually take you and team to get on board a new chapter, let's say, if that's the right term?
It takes less than a sprint. It takes less than 2 weeks to get them onboarded. Because from the very start, we've designed it such that onboarding and expanding this has to be easy. Because from the very start, we've had a very clear side of the monster that we're dealing with. And from the very start, we've known that we're not going to be a David against this Goliath. We need many, many Davids against this Goliath. So how do we onboard people? We have a very I don't want to call it prescriptive, but we have a process on Trello, we have documentation, we have manuals, and we'd love for people to translate those manuals and those materials into German or any other language that would be needed. So please, yes, send them our way. Bring them, in fact, bring them with you.
Right. Thanks, Kubair.
You're welcome.
Hi, it's Marina. Thank you very much for that. I think you mentioned a couple of lessons learned. My question would be, what was the biggest lessons learned for you? Like, if you could do it again, what would you do differently?
Honestly, I probably wouldn't do very much differently. I'd try and do more. I'd try and accelerate things more. And the biggest lesson learned was it's easier than we think. We spent months. I spent months in a dark hole trying to figure this stuff out. But it turned out it's easier than I think, because the tools that we need, the craft we need to do this, we already have it. It only seemed like a mountain until I'd realized I have all the tools I need to break this mountain down. Because it's a choice. Which game do we play? Do we play their game, which is dark and evil and violent? Not equipped to do that. Or do we get them to play the game in our park? We can get them to play our game, i.e. we play our own game. We know we're going to win at it. Why? Because ours is a nice, clean, good, beneficial game. The key thing is being there to make sure that you enable people to believe that they can actually write their own stories, their own narrative of change. That's the most difficult part, is convincing people. Why? Because this is a longer road, right? It's a 6-month journey. The minimum commitment is 4 days, 2 hours every day to attend the mini MBA, to absorb the knowledge we have, we want to give, and they have to share with them. That's the hard part, convincing them that, look, you really need to take 2 hours out every day for 4 days and come and be with us. And bear in mind, these are poor people. These are marginalized people. So if I leave my food stand, if I leave my barber shop, which is usually a seat on the street, or if I leave my shoe shine stand and I come and spend 2 hours with you, then that's me not earning for 2 hours. So convincing them that, look, dude, investing these 8 hours is going to be amazing for you. You'll see these results. That's been the most difficult part. But that was also difficult in the start because we didn't have any data. But once we'd done 100 people, we had the data, that became easier as well. So to succinctly answer your question, I would, if I could do this all over again, I'd do more. I don't know how. I have to inspect and adapt that. And I'd get partners on board sooner rather than later.
Kubair, the work you're doing is mainly with people that have a business.
So we've got 2 separate models. One is we work with micro entrepreneurs who already have a business, which makes our intervention easier, simpler to bring to life.
Yeah.
The other one we're doing is with high school graduates and high school kids in those communities where they don't have a business, but we're teaching them how to inspect and adapt. The curriculum is slightly different, where it's less about how to grow your business and more about how to inspect and adapt in life. Because again, those are core skills that they will need as they grow old in that ecosystem, because we are at the moment, we are unable to change that ecosystem overnight.
Yes.
And that would be the desire if I had a genie, right? But we don't. So the idea is, whilst we're helping the elders and the youth establish businesses, become role models, improve their their financial independence, and be able to afford proper education for their children. Because remember, these places have no social security net like we have in Europe, or at least for now, right?
Yeah.
It's about enabling their youth as well. So it's both. It's people who have a business and people who don't have a business. The curriculum is slightly different for the two audiences.
Last summer, we had the World Council of Churches here in Karlsruhe meeting, and I went there and I met people from churches all over the world, and somebody from South Africa, they approached me and said, you know about Agile, we need people that come to South Africa and work with kids in the townships to teach them about Agile. And I'm willing to do this, but I was a bit reluctant because I was unsure whether or not this would really, because they have no money, they have no means in my, or no resources that I can see. So how do they create a business they can live from with no means at all? But maybe my view of their resources is too limited, and so,
you'd be really surprised, Mentos, on how resourceful they can be. I met a guy on a street on a red light selling IKEA magazines, IKEA catalogs, right? So the stuff we get for free, selling them, right?
Okay.
For equivalent like 50 cents. So I stopped the car, I got out, I started talking to the young guy, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? This is like free stuff I get. Why are you trying to sell this to me? And he goes, that's not a magazine I'm selling, sir. It's the hope I'm selling. I was like, there's no IKEA in this city. He goes, I don't care. People don't care if there's no IKEA in this city. He goes, we can't even afford this stuff. But we feel good when we look at it. We go like, oh, look at that. That would be so cool to have that in my house. It's the hope I'm selling.
Okay.
So they're very resourceful people. I mean, some of the hacks I've learned in terms of changing behaviors and changing team mindsets are from the streets of Cairo, Sana'a, and Karachi, because their resilience and their resourcefulness gives me new energy every time I'm there. Even though it breaks my heart to see that we can't do more, we can't change their world as quickly as we'd like to see it change. But their resilience, oh my God, their adaptability, wow, hats off to them. So I'd encourage you to go there.
Okay, I will.
Kubair, thanks for the inspiring session so far. Last year, I think it was last year, I had the opportunity to work with a network of entrepreneurs. It's called Taste of Malawi, and basically they are doing, they're providing for people. They are kind of a start in a sewing business. They do workshops. It's about education. They help them to sell their stuff out. If I understand you correctly, I might like to just hint them towards you, like the founder as well. Yeah, she would be called Jana. She's one of the founders in there, because that could be a great match. Yeah,
a lot of the ladies we work with in Yemen, particularly Yemen and Karachi, they engage in handicraft business. So they do stuff like, in fact, even in Cairo, there's a lady who makes sequence-based T-shirts and blankets. There are ladies who sew purses out of natural materials and artificial materials. So that'd be a great connect. Thank you very much, Sasha. Looking forward to hearing from Jana.
thank you.
So, ich denke, es ist Zeit, dass wir unsere Breakout Rooms eröffnen. Wir haben 2 Runden von Breakout Rooms. Die haben einfach, Sascha, soll ich den Namen geben oder machen wir einfach Raum 1 bis 3?
Genau, das sollte, glaube ich, ausreichen, Raum 1 bis 3. Kubair, would it be possible that you stop sharing your screen?
Absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much once again for being here to listen to my narrative. And I hope you guys pull on it. I don't want to push it and take it and take inspiration from it, and be the change agents outside of enterprises that we all need to be.
Thank you, Kubair.